Hello everyone, welcome to Leading with Agility, the show that uses the world around us to explore how leadership can be inspired by agility. As always, I'm your host Arif, and I'm joined by...
myself, TK, your usual run-of-the-mill co-host.
Brilliant, thank you to TK. And for all our listeners out there, we have a very special guest today because we're joined by Rebecca Smart. Rebecca, someone we know, is a global leadership and talent coach at Penguin Random House, world's largest consumer book publisher. I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of...
My shelf is full.
Yes, I've heard of Penguin Random House and probably have books on their bookshelves published by them as well. She has over 30 years of experience as a publisher and publishing leader. And in 2023, she decided to change her career direction into coaching, establishing herself as the company's first fully dedicated internal coach. During her distinguished career, Rebecca has also held the position of CEO in both large corporate divisions and small independent companies. So we're really delighted to have her join us today. Rebecca, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be a guest host today. As Arif said, I'm a creative leader turned coach. I'm also a client of TK and Arif's wonderful services in the past. So it's fantastic to join them today. I'm looking forward to a great conversation about coaching.
Thank you for the kind words, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And on that point about coaching, so yes, our episode today, which is what we're going to be hopefully covering, is some of this around various leadership styles that leaders may inhabit or exhibit depending on the situations around them. One of those leadership styles could be more of a coaching style or a coaching stance, and that's something maybe we wanted to talk about a bit today with yourself, Rebecca, and explore what that means from your experience, and how does it compare in terms of, the modern definition and practice of professional coaching, and also what does it mean for leaders who want to wear that hat of maybe that professional coaching perspective. So let's explore the conversation, see where we go, and maybe start off with this conversation about leaders exhibiting that coaching stance. TK, I don't know, how do we start the conversation today? Where do you want to kick off with?
Let's first define what we mean by professional coaching, right? If you look at the ICF definition, it's like the partnering with the clients in the thought-provoking process, which, obviously is geared towards getting a goal. But first, maybe Rebecca would like to chip in and, in your opinion, when you think about it, is it a good idea to think about a senior leader becoming a coach? Is wearing this hat something that you think is worthwhile pursuing?
I would say yes, definitely, to a point. And I guess that's what we're going to explore is what are the pros and cons? What are the tensions of leaders coaching their own people? So I think coaching for me is really all about assuming that the person you're coaching has the answers within them, that they are naturally creative, resourceful and whole. And it's about really helping people find the way to whatever it is they want in their lives. And so it's definitely a good thing for leaders to be like that with their people. But I can see that there are things that might make it tricky. And I think it needs very, very careful management. I don't know, TK, what are the pros of it maybe?
Well, I think I would get to the pros of it, but before I do so, I think there's one big one, which is a challenge when it comes to leaders being coaches, because this particular word itself is being often misunderstood. We quoted the definition of what coaching is, but what I found myself, for instance, personally, as being on a receiving end of quote-unquote coaching, which is, for instance, I was working in a bank and one person angrily told me, he's like, TK, do you want my coaching or not? And it's very interesting to think about how the word coaching is being misunderstood and overused. So I think you've given us a wonderful definition, Rebecca. But I was wondering, in your perspective, what do you think people think and believe when it comes to coaching? And when you say that you also were a head of a coach, how do people see it, and do they really correctly interpret what coaching is in the first place? Rebecca, Arif, what do you think?
Well, okay, maybe I'll add a few pence and then see what Rebecca wants to add to that. I think it's interesting around the misapplication or misuse that you highlighted, TK. That's a fascinating one as well, because clearly in that example you gave, it was somehow weaponized in terms of, why don't you want it? You should need it, or you are
in their mind. They clearly did, yeah,
exactly. You're something wrong with you. You need the coaching. When, as Rebecca, you were saying earlier, it's really about it's a guidance. It's a way of helping guide someone to their next destination, right? And that has to come from the coachee or the person who's requesting the coaching, or who would like the coaching, wanting to seek that out because they want to improve. Although I guess maybe that's an interesting one, and I've actually always found this to be challenging from a corporate setting, Rebecca, in terms of you get this view of, especially at very senior levels, coaching being, I suppose, requested, but in many cases it's part of a performance review process as well, where it is strongly recommended or is given as a kind of remedy. I don't know if you've experienced any of that in the work you've been doing in the corporate setting.
Yeah, our approach is very much that the person having the coaching should want the coaching. I think that's the only way that it can work. And actually that's something for leaders to think about when they are using coaching with their own people.
Yes.
Is that sort of, the whole power dynamic.
Yes.
Many angles to that, of course.
Yeah.
I've had people, I think some people do misunderstand what coaching is. And of course the word coaching is used in many different ways. So in sport,
yes,
coaching is telling people what they can do better. And I think people know that definition of it. Although I think sport coaching has now got a lot more aspects to it that are like life coaching or executive coaching, leadership coaching than it used to have. I think a lot of people think coaching means getting advice still, though.
Yeah.
And that's something we'll definitely touch upon later in this episode, right? But it's a very good point, Rebecca. But going back to your original question about the positive sides of a senior leader becoming a coach, I have some examples myself. And first of all, when you're a leader of leaders, and this is, I guess, one of the definitions of senior leadership, I guess the coaching is one of the only options you have, because you exert your value through other leaders, and thus improving them, helping them improve, helping them reach their goals is immensely valuable. Another thing is, as a senior leader, you're often separated from the day-to-day. So this inquisitive style of conversation, which coaching is one of the best options, because you probably are so far away from what other people might be doing that you literally might not know. And having this open-minded conversation and open-minded stance is really helpful. So these are the two I would give. But Rebecca, Arif, what do you think? What are the positive aspects of a senior leader wearing a coaching hat there might be?
Yeah, for me, the best coaching is working on not just the doing, but the being. It takes you below the sort of rational brain, and it works on who you are at your best, your wisest, when you're in the zone, and it helps you access that. So if you think about that, then having your people have access to their best selves has got to be a good thing. I think it can help people live in alignment with their values, which means that they're more passionate about what they do. People tell themselves stories about the world. It can help them see different perspectives. It's such a powerful tool. I really do think there's massive value to it being used in the workplace.
Do you? I mean, and clearly in your work that you do, Rebecca, you're seeing that on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure. In terms of the value add aspect, I suppose, as you were just highlighting there, as I was mentioning earlier about the performance review process, etc., and when you're maybe as a line manager, especially trying to help improve the productivity or quality of work or whatever it is in your team, and you've got employees that you want them to get to another level and bring them up, etc., and you're their line manager. From what your observations and work you're doing, how have you observed the best ways or approaches that managers take where they can apply that coaching hat, but also ensure that the business outcomes, etc., are being met?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about trying to understand the reason, what it is that someone needs in order to reach a goal. And that goal might be to be better in some way that the manager perceives. So is it to do with their mindset, or is it their knowledge, or is it their skills, or is it behavioral? And depending on which of those it is, they might need a different kind of support. So if it's mindset, then coaching might be helpful to try and understand what's going on underneath the surface. Why is it that this person who presumably the manager knows is capable is not performing the way the manager thinks they should be? And if it's knowledge or skills that are missing, then something else might be more appropriate.
And on that something else, I mean, you mentioned earlier about the lack of understanding knowledge about the definition. I blurted out mentoring, but that's what I was thinking of. How equipped do you think managers are with knowing how to adopt the right stance and maybe they're not the right people to be the mentors, but knowing that, okay, mentorship is going to be more appropriate rather than coaching, as you said, because of that, it's a skill gap or a knowledge gap or something like that, rather than something inherently around how they see the world and their belief systems or value systems, etc. Is that another challenge that you see, or is that something you've observed? Curious about that really as well.
Yeah, I think managers maybe sometimes don't have the right conversation to understand what it is, and maybe sometimes people don't open up, which obviously is one of the biggest risks of a manager trying to coach one of their people. Is that power dynamic? There's no getting away from that.
I want, and I suppose looking at the other alternative side of things, looking at why is it not maybe the best idea for a senior leader to be a coach? We've talked about power dynamics, and I do wonder something there around. Yeah, is it? I don't know, TK. I think we've seen this is in the work we do as well, perhaps. Where I can give an example. I've worked with a manager many years ago who was of the very strong belief that he was, obviously very good at his job, and he was very skillful, very knowledgeable. A lot of that was true, but when it came to the nurturing of his team and really looking after their them from a non-work point of view, in terms of, are they enjoying their work? Are they satisfied? Are they motivated? All of that good stuff. He struggled, and he found it very difficult to relate to his team in that kind of way. But he thought he was, behaving in a way that was working. And there was this complete disconnect where his line reports didn't really like him at all. He thought that everyone did like him. And, the awareness just was completely lacking.
Well, speaking of great culture of communication, and feedback.
Yeah. And so I wonder how dangerous it could have been if he were to adopt a coaching stance when he probably hadn't gone through some kind of process of self-learning and self-awareness. I think so. I think what I'm curious about is at what point is it at the right point for a manager to take this kind of hat on? Do they need to do some work themselves before they can even contemplate doing it? That's what I'm wondering.
Obviously, coaching is look, for many people, it's maybe a bit devalued, and we have all kinds of strange coaches in the market. But professional coaching is a difficult thing to master. And I'm sure, Rebecca, you would attest to that, how much learning and self-work one has to do to be able to inhabit this stance. And many people, just by, thinking about that, might be overwhelmed and they might want to take shortcuts. So and as a senior leader, one would assume not everyone has the time to master the skill. It might be easier to hire some professionals. So what's your view on that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think in order to be a coach in any setting, and actually especially at work, because of the power dynamics, I think people have to go through proper training. And if you go through proper training, you will become aware of how you are. You cannot avoid that. The way that you have proper coach training involves you being coached and you being observed coaching. And I don't think I think the kind of people that you're talking about, Arif, if they had the training, they would become more self-aware, and they would have both the doing of coaching, i.e. the skills, but also they would change their being as they went through the experience of the training. Otherwise, they're not coaching.
Exactly.
No, of course.
You've hit the nail on the head there, I think. And I think that's what we want to see more of, isn't it? And I like the idea. I think I've not thought about it in this way, but I do like the idea of coaching as a medium or mechanism for getting that self-awareness out, in terms of the for leaders, etc., going through that training. But I suppose there is an investment for that companies, organizations need to do, and not all organizations or companies are prepared to do that. So, is there a halfway house? Maybe maybe that's the question. Like, you do see. I mean, we do it ourselves. To be fair, TK, we do teach a module on applying some coaching stance in a very light way as a manager, at least just to open up different possibilities for relationships between team and manager. But yeah, interesting.
Well, I mean, but there's also stuff that stands in its way. Like, for instance, there's would you be able to keep the confidentiality as a senior leader, right? Essentially, it's your job to make the best decisions for the organization. How would that work? So that's an interesting one. But you're right. Some form of a coaching stance is applicable. But the question is, Rebecca, I'm sure on your journey, being a senior leader and also a coach, you've encountered some of these things that can hold senior leaders back. So I was wondering if there's a personal story, or there's something that you feel is the biggest hurdle that leaders and senior leaders must overcome to inhabit this stance.
I mean, I have coached on and off throughout my leadership time for 20 years.
So there you go. Right?
I have coached when I was the managing director of a company. I coached people. Not people who directly reported to me, but people who reported to people who reported to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we specifically would have, those were coaching sessions. It wasn't done in it wasn't in another meeting. They were proper coaching sessions.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible, but I think the building trust is much harder. Is someone going to properly open up to you? You're in control of their career. They're not in control of your career.
Essentially, yeah.
I think it's harder work to do it within that setting. It's not impossible, and I guess you could say, well, even if someone doesn't fully open up, there are things that you are going to help them with. That you will have an impact, and there will be things that they move forward with that they perhaps wouldn't have moved forward with without the coaching. So even if it's not as transformational as it could have been without that hierarchical relationship, it still can be very helpful. And I also think that managers can be trained to use coaching, to have a coaching approach to their management, and that's a different thing, but equally effective and helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was referring to earlier. But that's good to know that. Yeah, you see benefit in both. I think is what we're saying there. That's interesting. I think on that note, let's take a break and take a moment to pause the conversation, and then see where we go when we return. Our next webinar is coming your way in October. As many of you know, L&D for many organisations is critical to employee well-being and engagement. Despite this, many organisations struggle to prioritise investment, while others consider it an afterthought. That's why we're excited to be joined by Sam Goodman, an experienced L&D specialist, who will be sharing his tips and tricks to secure the investment you need for your L&D team. He'll be walking us through his approach and explaining why it's not all about asking for a budget, but about demonstrating value to the organisation. Visit our website homepage to learn more and sign up today. Welcome back, everyone. So earlier we were talking about managers inhibiting the role of a coach in different perspectives, the power dynamics involved, and how, as Rebecca was highlighting earlier, it can maybe not always have the biggest transformational effect when there's a hierarchy involved between the coach and coachee. But moving the conversation on, let's look at people's needs and what in organizations people are asking for when it comes to coaching, in terms of expectations versus what they actually get. And I think one of the things it seems that we're seeing, or there appears to be some kind of trend, is that people are, wanting coaching, but what they really mean is something different. I know we touched on it earlier on. Maybe it's mentoring, maybe it's something else. But I wonder why that happens. Is that something you've seen a lot of, Rebecca, or is it something that's always been around? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and as an internal coach, it's something, I've got 30 years experience in the industry. And I definitely, people want to ask me advice, and it's really hard sometimes not to. It's like the answer's really obvious. To me it is, but it isn't to them. And if I just tell them, they're much less likely to take that than if they've come up with the answer themselves. So it's it's like when you know that they've got the answer, they just need to find it. It's really important, I think, to not tell someone. But equally, I think even as a coach, you can sort of say, look, I'd like to suggest something. I'm just going to step out of coaching for a minute.
Yes.
Something is coming to me. Would you like me to suggest it? And actually, during the beginning of a coaching relationship, you can discuss, well, what happens in those moments? How do we deal with that? And say to the person, you are very welcome to reject my suggestions or offer a counter, or, it's about defining the relationship between you from the beginning.
Yeah, even though, I have 30 years experience in the trade, it's like, and probably, this thing will always hang on the relationship, right? That just by the sheer talent and experience, your advice will, I'm sure, be really valuable, golden to the people that you have, you give it to, even if you're stepping out of the role and taking the hat off. What I find interesting is how you talk about coaching in the beginning of the relationship, and how, again, we've talked about the definition, but how do you brief the person to make sure that they fully understand that it's not just a fancy word, it's a particular type of a conversation, a particular type of a relationship that needs to be there. And I think the first words, the initial conversation elements are key for the person to really understand what's happening and what will be happening going forward.
Yeah, completely agree. That first chemistry session. So I usually do a chemistry session with someone just to get to know each other, see whether we feel we can work together, and also to explain to them how I see, what's the model of coaching that I've learned, what I think coaching is, what ask them if they have any experience of coaching, answer any questions that they have. The model of coaching that I have learned is actually, it's one where you do visualizations if someone's up for that. You ask them to embody how they're feeling. It's quite, you can push people, and not everyone's comfortable with that. So it's kind of right from the beginning getting clear on, well, where is someone in their journey on having had coaching or not. Being clear that the work is their work to do. I'm not going to do the work for them. I'm here my time is theirs to make space for them to process what's going on and decide the best way forward.
And for those of you listening, in coaching parlance, this is sometimes called contracting. So thank you for explaining your approach to that. It's beautiful to listen to. I wonder if it's something you then do, during the coaching sessions as well, as in come back to and reconfirm or check again, if what is happening is what they're meeting their expectations, etc. Is that something you do at all, Rebecca, in how you coach, or just more of your style? Would be interesting to hear about.
Yeah, so that was what I was just talking about with the chemistry session. Then once we've agreed we're going to work together, then the next step would be a discovery session, which can be quite a long session, and that's kind of really beginning the work of, as I was saying about sort of being and doing. The foundations, if you like, are like better self-awareness around the being. Like who am I when I'm at my best? What are the things that tend to get in my way? What do I really care about in the world? What do I, when I'm older, what do I want people to have said about the impact I've had?
Wow.
What is a symbol for my wisest self so that I can access it? Those kinds of things. We're trying to get that in place right from the very beginning.
Nice.
And then, I would be absolutely saying to someone, actually, we could use a visualization here. Would you like to try that? Or even would you like to stand up and move around and try sort of inhabiting different places in the room to see different perspectives, that kind of thing. So being playful, but asking permission to try some new things. Definitely. As I go through, I would be doing that every session.
It's amazing. Thank you. That's really lovely to hear. And maybe for our listeners, especially some of them leaders, some of them who work in the L&D space, may not be fully aware of the process a coach like yourself would go through. I think it's really good to hear what that actually sounds like and what that experience could be like. So if you are listening and you're exploring coaching for yourself or for your leadership team, this is what it's all about. This is the work. As you said, Rebecca, it's playful, but also very much with the permission of the coachee in order to help them get to a better place. Fascinating insights. Thank you. Tika, I don't know, where did you want to go next with our conversation?
I would to be a typical TK and maybe, stir things up a bit. I think what's really interesting is, and I don't know what's your perspective on it, Rebecca and Arif, it's obviously I'm a big believer in the value of congruence and authenticity. And it's interesting that, on one hand, we have a style of being a leader and how we're being seen in the organization we are in. And then it would be interesting, we both know me, and it would be quite strange if you've now seen me behaving very differently in a coaching session, not necessarily being myself, not speaking as I normally would, not having a similar mindset. It would be possibly feel jarring and artificial for many people. So I'm just wondering, right? If Rebecca, you've mentioned channel switching, you've mentioned visualizations, and I'm guessing not many leaders are speaking this language and using these style of techniques in their regular conversation and the way they are. So I'm just wondering, how do we bridge that gap? On one hand, being authentic, our authentic selves. On the other, is it really wise to switch so far from what you normally are day to day?
I think, well, again, if a leader was learning to be a coach, it's like it's a new set of skills, and with that comes a new set of language. And I do think that you don't have to use the jargon. Like you can say to someone, when you're your wisest self, what would you think about this situation? That's not an inauthentic thing or a very different thing to say. Talking to someone about their wisest self, most people understand what that means. So I think there are ways to use coaching skills in a normal setting, and then within a coaching session, you might actually do a visualization, but I don't think you would do that outside of a formal, a professional coaching setting.
I suppose it goes back.
Sorry,
go on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think there are coaching skills that can be really, really effective for leaders to use, that don't need to be jarring, and they can be, things like just articulating what's going on, and there's a conversation going on and there's tension rising. For a leader to say, it feels like there's some tension in the room, what's going on? That's a very coaching question, and it's incredibly powerful, and a leader who does that is going to be very effective.
Indeed. And, for instance, in orgs, that's calling the emotional field. I completely agree with you there. And it's just an interesting one. When you're thinking about, yourself as a member of the organization, as someone that other people see, a leader, a senior leader, it's interesting that, through the process of learning and becoming a coach, it will change you. Absolutely will. And it's just interesting to see what is it about coaching that's compatible with the way you lead, and where's the rub? Where are the elements that, you probably wouldn't feel congruent in a coaching session with someone within your organization, even obviously not your report, someone separate and so on. And this is a great way of self-reflection. Many people obviously train coaching as a self-improvement activity too. Not only, and well, hopefully they should do the job, because this is where the real value is being brought to others that are helping, but it will also show you how your behavior is different from the coaching stance. Now that's important, right? So that possibly raises a big one. So Arif, when you've been learning coaching, where were the elements? What were the elements that you found? Okay, well, this changes me.
Oh, there's a lot, isn't it? I think some of the things that Rebecca was describing there, where you're stepping out of your comfort zone, learning techniques that you might not be totally familiar with, or expecting to use in a coaching setting or work setting. I think that's those are the ones that really push you. So I look, I'll put a health warning on this. People have varying opinions on NLP. I appreciate that. It causes angst amongst the coaching community because there are strong opinions on it. But that was an example of when I was learning some of those techniques. They are a bit different to what you might be expecting. There was also some transactional analysis stuff as well, which I really struggled with. Actually, I couldn't learn it. I think the whole concept of parent-child relationship as a metaphor, and trying to explore that in a coaching setting professionally, really affected me to the point I probably wouldn't look at it again ever. Excuse me. So yeah, as you were saying, Rebecca, I think there are, as you go through that training, it affects you, it changes you, it does make you rethink how working relationships are built and how people are affected and how people come with beliefs and views of the world of what they believe work to be, their careers to be. All of that swirls around in your head. So I think with all that in my mind, and thanks for the question, TK, my follow-up, I think, is when you're in that senior leader position, as we've been talking about with you, Rebecca, and applying the coaching stance, are there occasions where you think, actually, this isn't someone I can coach for various reasons? It could be because they're too close personally, or maybe there are other reasons for it. But have you been in that situation where you feel actually this isn't someone I can coach and it needs to be someone else, or it's not appropriate, or what have you, or how do you navigate that? I suppose.
Yeah, I haven't certainly. I didn't coach anyone. Yeah, there were people that I just wouldn't have coached, but I didn't get to that point of it was like it was obvious to me who should be doing it and who wasn't when I was a leader. Now, so the way it works with Penguin Random House is that it's the talent team who kind of refer people to me.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, I'm sure there are people who they think, oh no, that it's there are reasons why it might not work. But no, that's not something that certainly in this current role that has been an issue. I do think this question that you raised earlier is one that organizations really need to think about: is who is asking for the coaching?
Yes,
because I think that you can have a manager pressuring or saying, this person needs coaching, but unless that person believes that they need to work on the thing the manager thinks they need to work on, it's not going to give the result that the manager wants.
Yeah. And I think on that one, one thing I've used as a technique in that type of situation is triad-based coaching. I don't know if you've maybe call it something different, or you've maybe dabbled in that as well, which is I have tried to get the manager and the coachee in a room together, at least as an initial goal setting or alignment conversation about, okay, coachee, what would you like? And manager, what are your goals? And then try and align and see whether there are any similarities, overlaps. Is that something you've maybe tried before? Have you experienced anything like that? Does that work?
That's certainly, again, in this role, that's not something that I have yet done. But I think, that can be, I suppose, if the relationship between the manager and their team member is a strong one, that can work really well. I think there might be situations in some organizations where that might not be the case. And so you might get people saying what they think is they should say.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah,
They'll hear
because they're in that room together, isn't it? And it'll be like, what my manager said, or
exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting. So, TK, what were you going to add? Sorry.
Well, it's just maybe thinking about my own experience and sharing a story that I've been a manager of a team of leaders, and I remember ending my engagement with the organization, and years from then I was in touch with quite a few people, and one of them asked me if you can help me as a coach. And it was interesting how years after we entered into a coaching relationship. And the person really found it strange. I think, the fact that I was just so different in this new relationship. Obviously, I wasn't the person's manager, and it was years, and possibly I was even a different person. I have seen it in their eyes. I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. And maybe I felt like, okay, maybe they wanted and needed the old TK. Instead of the TK coach, right? So that's an interesting experience. I'll probably keep with myself for years.
So TK, do you think that was because you had changed while being trained to be a coach?
I think it was. There's many reasons why that particular thing happened. I think obviously the actual external situation was very different. It's not that. So I've trained a lot, but I was also a professional coach when I was their manager. But I think we've never had a coaching relationship. We always had a mentoring one, and I think the fact that the person wanted coaching afterwards and in so many years, and in fact they thought that they'll get what they usually were getting, and the fact that I've inhabited a coaching stance was very unexpected, even though we clearly explained how this would look like, right? So one thing is the words, but the other thing is what the person actually needs and expects. And I think sometimes, as you've said about contracting, the words might not be enough. A person, and I apart from working with wonderful clients, such when we were working together, I sometimes have side coaching sessions on platforms just to maybe brush up on some skills, and they're really short. And what happens is you explain what coaching is, but always at the end of the session, I say, "All right, so that was coaching. Was it effective for you?" Right? So just to seek the feedback at the end and say, "Well, I've told you what coaching is. You just had a coaching session. Now, what do you really think?"
Fascinating.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we'll draw the episode to an end. But before we do, I think there was something interesting you mentioned, Rebecca, earlier on around organizations and how they set up the coaching relationship with coaches, etc. If for our listeners out there, many of them leaders themselves, but maybe in the HR or L&D space, for example, what would you say to I suppose those folks around how to effectively set up either a coaching relationship for a manager and the people he or she is managing, or someone who's approached them saying, "I need coaching," and how do I get some coaching? Any thoughts that you'd like to share with your 20, 30 years experience that might prove beneficial for them?
So I think if a person comes forward wanting coaching, I would just say do it and finding the right coach. And I would go to ICF or I can't remember what the European equivalent of ICF, EMCC, is it?
EMCC,
that's the one. Yeah.
Go to their website and find coaches that are accredited. So the coaching school I've been trained with is Coactive CTR, Coactive Training Institute. I would highly recommend them. The model is genuinely transformative, and being trained in it has been transformative for me. And so, if someone comes forward asking for coaching, 100% do it, because if they want it and they are driven and have goals, it will help them achieve those. And as a supportive employer, why wouldn't you do that for someone?
Nice.
In terms of managers as coaches, I think, reflecting on this, I think my advice would be to begin with, what does it look like to have more of a coaching approach as a manager? Beginning with, for example, having the default question in your head, what do you think, when someone asks you a question? And just sort of get a group who are interested and train them in what is coaching and how can you use coaching techniques in your management. And what typically happens when you do that is a few people will go, "Oh, I'm really interested in this. I'd like to know more." And so use the positivity and the enthusiasm that's naturally there in the organization and see where it goes. I suppose I think that would be my advice to an organization where they're curious about how to begin introducing it.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think we'll end the episode on that note after listening to Rebecca's beautiful advice. So thank you to all our listeners for staying behind and listening to today's episode. Again, another thank you to Rebecca for joining us as a guest. It's been pleasure hosting you and hearing your thoughts and reflections. And for all of our listeners, as always, please subscribe to the podcast, give it a like or a subscribe. It always helps us with the algorithms. And until next time, we'll see you around. Thank you very much.